as Maddie said, I was graduated in 1986 and have been working as a cameraman and working for production companies and TV companies, working with sports and news and several things as in the media. But in 2010, I changed. I wanted to make my own films, and actually, it started with a story from my home village or a valley, a small valley. I made a film called. I don't know if you can see it, but this is Siblings Are Forever, about two siblings, Magnar and Odny, living in a very small farm in the western part of Norway. And it was, well, when we were filming that film, I was wondering, would people like to see this life, so no conflict and nothing else than living in with the 3 cows and close to the nature, and it was a slow film, but people loved it, and it was so nice to feel that, okay, I hit something in the audience, and that's the main thing for a filmmaker, to reach out to the audience and see if the story you are making and perhaps doing for 2 or 3 years in production and finally will reach out, and it did, yes. So that was the starting of the documentary film for me.
Okay, fantastic. So did you always know you wanted to study film? When you went to Volda University College, did you always know that you wanted to study film?
No, not always, but I have been always interested in pictures and stills photography and so on. And of course, you get influenced with other people and knowing someone in making films, and it become more and more interesting. And then I decided I want to try. Yes.
Fantastic. So you've referenced your first documentary film, and I want to, when we get later into talking about John and the last Norwegian Cowboy, I want to talk a little bit about this concept of time, because you referenced slow, right? A slower film, and there's some interesting conversations coming out from Norway about the slowness of media, right? But we've got a couple of questions already popping up in the chat. And would you be willing to share? So Odny and Magni were the inspiration for your first documentary film. And remind us again, where's your hometown in Norway?
Well, my hometown in Norway is Bergen. It's the second capital, largest town in Norway, and I think it's the most beautiful town, but that's my opinion. But it's along the coastline, and there are a lot of fjords and there are mountains close to. But I'm living actually on an island outside Bergen, just 20 minutes by car, and there are a bridge. But you also can take a fast ferry with 10 minutes, so you are in the center of the town. But it's a nice place. But it is also a lot of raining. But this mild climate and this autumn have been, the last month have been fantastic. So we are so pleased. Yeah.
There's nothing better than a good Norwegian fall. There is nothing better. That's fantastic. Amazing. So Skin till Evig, so Siblings Are Forever, there's kind of 2 parts, right? There's the first one, and then there is your second one, which has a component of going to the United States. And so, so do you want to...
Actually, in the first film, they got visit from relatives in Minnesota in the first film, and of course they invited them. But this Magnar and Odny, the siblings, have never hardly been out of the valley before, so nobody did know or thought that this would not going to happen. But after 2 years, there are other relatives that I wanted to visit Minnesota and their relatives, and they joined them. And suddenly they decided, okay, we are going to go. And I was, wow, what's happening? And this, of course, I asked, can I make a film about it? Yeah, of course. And we joined it, and that was actually a very fast production of the sequel film. I think they decided in the May, and we were shooting in New York and Minnesota in August, and finished film in the Christmas for that one. But it was more a traveling movie, but it was in a connection with their life back in the valley. It was a nice trip, but it was also nice to come back to the quiet valley in a way. But in that film, I was filming especially in Minnesota, and everywhere I was filming, I met American with the roots back to Norway, and I wanted to talk to about Norway, and the farmer had the relatives in Norway. Everyone we met in a way, and that makes me thought perhaps I should do a story about immigration story, and find a character or a story that I can make a film of. But I didn't know anyone at that time. But sometimes you are in luck, and sometimes you can feel it. So actually, 1 year after, I was invited with a folk music orchestra, or do you say folk music orchestra and dancing group? They should have a touring from Minneapolis to Seattle, and they asked me to make a movie about them, but was not quite sure that I wanted that. But I said, okay, I will make a road trip for your orchestra and join you, and because then I know that the audience could be an audience of a character, and find a story that I could make a film of. And I had right, because I think it was the 5th or 6th concert. We were in Montana in Big Timber, and it was the 2nd of October 2016. I saw John in the audience, but I didn't know who it was. But after the concerts, he was suddenly, I didn't see him bring his own accordion with him that night. And suddenly he was playing on the stage after the concert with some of the Norwegian musicians. And I heard it was some Norwegian folk tones. And so I had my camera, and I was filming him. And after that, I actually, one man grabbed my shoulder and said, "That is John W. Hoiland. His father came from Egersund. He's an interesting guy. If you should talk to John." That was how it started, the 2nd of October in 2016.
My gosh. So you had you didn't know, right? This folk music road trip from Minneapolis to Seattle with this folk music and dance group, you had no idea that you were going to engage with a Norwegian in this way. Amazing. Well, I think the setting of Big Timber, Montana is so fascinating, right? There's so much intrigue about Montana as a concept, right? And maybe that's a little bit the Kevin Costner Yellowstone romanticization of kind of the ranch life, right? So when you were encouraged to go and greet John or say hi to John the first time, how did John respond?
Well, actually, I don't know if he invited me, but I asked him, can I visit your ranch tomorrow morning at 7:00? Because the bus should go further on to Seattle. And yeah, of course you can. Come on. And I was visiting him in the morning, and I had 2 hours. And I think my camera was running all the 2 hours because he was talking and talking and talking about his life. And at that moment, I was sure this will be my next film if I get financing and so on. And that how it is. You have to have an ID. You have to work with it and apply for money. And I made a trailer for 2 or 3 minutes, and the film consultant, okay, that's a nice story. So I get some funding to start with, and then I was visiting John the February in 2017, and that was my first filming in Montana with John.
Amazing. So that Frode, I've got so many questions about that. But we got a question from one of the participants today too. That's hearkening a little bit to this, what you're talking about. That you meet John, right? And then you had to go back to Norway and think about how this was actually going to come to be, right? And so when you think about, there's some curiosity in the public today, but what are some of the differences in producing films between Norway and the United States? What are some of the challenges that you encounter that maybe are different than how production happens here, or strengths of the Nordic and Norwegian model?
Well, it's not that much different, but of course the distance, because if something happened in John's life, I used to have to plan for my next filming in Montana. So the first thing I did was to find a corporate cinematographer in Bozeman, and I found Jason Burlich. He is a cinematographer in Bozeman and work in the same way that I do, making his own films, and we had a so nice cooperation. And I worked with him when I needed 2 cameras. He had a drone, and he even did 2 scenes in the film. When I phoned him and been in contact with him, can you do that and do some scenes with that? Actually, the cutting of the wood in the start, that was Jason's shot alone. So he get known of John as well, and they become friends, and that's the most important thing when you are making a film about a man or whatever it is. You have to come close and be known, and you have to trust each other. And we use a lot of time talking, have lunch in his kitchen or out in the garden and having a good time. That's so important to come close for John. Yeah.
So it sounds like it's a relational process, right? It's about building trust, right, with your subject and getting him to trust you.
Yeah.
So how much footage do you think you took? I mean, in creating, the film was about 90 minutes. And so, you talked about the cutting floor and also needing to call Jason and say, I need these shots. How much footage actually didn't make it into the 90 minutes that we've seen?
Well, I've got that question before, but I'm not quite sure, because it's so lot. And John was actually he liked to tell stories. He liked to tell about his life, and he knew the year, the dates, and everything that happened 50 years ago. So, we had to let the camera rolling, and I know, okay, that story, that is not for me, but you have to he have to tell me, and so you have to, in a way, keeping in the tracks again and asking a new question, and so it was. So I don't know, 20 hours or more. Yeah, could be much more. I don't know.
Yeah. It's amazing. So what do you do with all of that extra 18 and a half hours that the public hasn't seen?
Well, the process is starting in the editing that you're making small teams stories, stories that are simply, don't think of the length or whatever, but it's a way of making he cutting wood, he are hunting or so on, and you make. I'm making some small videos before I go to the editor and we're starting building the film. So I don't know exactly how the film is starting before we're sitting in the editing room, but I know that actually the last time I was in Montana filming, that was the scene when John and Jim meet again after the heart problem with Jim, and at the ending of the time, and that actually was the last or second last day of filming in Montana, and it was so, in a way, the most difficult way to, or the filming was the relationship between John and Jim. I know how strong it was, but to make that in the film and the stories, that isn't quite easy with two old guys that are in a way don't actually talk so much about their feelings.
Yeah, there's not a lot of immediate material, right?
No. So perhaps that was the hard part of making this film. But in the end, I got one shooting day with those two guys in the end, and I felt okay. I got it. Yeah.
So what was it? I mean, what were you looking in order to evoke kind of that emotion and the depth of the bond between those two? What kind of things were you looking for as a filmmaker and as a storyteller?
Well, we ended up. I saw that the telephone conversation between them had to have a meaning. That was the strong thing I have to use because I couldn't film them doing a lot of things together all the time. The talking was the strong thing that connected them. So I used. I think every conversation I shot are used in the film, but they didn't have so much to say to each other, but they had to talk with each other. They needed that conversation each day.
You know, it was beautiful the way last night in the screening at Vesterheim in the live audience when John picks up the rotary phone for the first time that first morning, right? There was this kind of sweet chuckle in the audience too, because the conversation wasn't happening over one of our newfangled devices, right? And it wasn't a FaceTime call or a Zoom call in order to make this happen, right? It was the simple act. I also love in the film how you show the phone where he has all the pieces of paper with phone numbers on top. We talk about so often about how no one knows anybody's phone number anymore. You know, and that just those simple relational pieces that the film shows along the way are really beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, so when you're filming, and this is a little bit of a technical question about this film, what kind of equipment did you and your collaborators use? Were there special types of cameras that you knew you had to bring to Montana to survive the winter months, or what equipment did you use?
No, I'm not. It's not special. The camera, it's a Sony camera FS7, and actually I had a sound engineering with me 3 times, and I did the sound myself sometimes. So it is not heavy equipment. It was much more equipment in 10 or 15 years ago than you had to carry a heavy overweight when traveling by plane. But now it's more easy. It's a smaller camera, and it's nice to do. But Jason had a drone, and we took some drone pictures, and I also cooperated with another company in Bozeman and get some really nice helicopter scenes that I also got. So yeah, it is a mix of a lot of things to make this production. Yes.
Amazing. So we've talked a little bit about the production elements, and it was an international collaboration when you get Jason involved from Bozeman and being in Norway. And I just want to return a little bit back to the narrative elements of this film. And I'm curious a little bit more on the backstory about heading out to John's that morning at 7 a.m., having 2 hours to make sure you don't miss the bus to Seattle, and knowing immediately, the sense that you knew immediately that you had a story to tell here. And so I'm curious, what was the story or what attracted you so much to John that you were so impassioned that this needed to be a film project for you?
Well, before I met John, I was interested to make a film about this, our Norway's history with immigration and how many. Yeah, and I also had a grandfather who went to the US in 1923. My mother was then 1 year old, and he should go work for a couple of years and earn money and come back and run the family farm. But he never come back. He died in the Seattle area. He was the age of 44. That was a story that was not told so much about when I grew up. But I think that it was. Perhaps I thought about that story when I was searching for a film, my next film, and so it's a mix. But when I met John, he was so proud that I come from Norway, where his father came from, to make film about him and his life. And I mean, the way John has run and stayed at the ranch, I think a lot of the Norwegian met the same way of life that John have lived. I mean, so hardworking, so simple, and I think the story makes some reflection for the Norwegian audience or everybody that we are coming from a place and we make our lives in a new place. And remember, they couldn't the language, and they went where they know somebody. So actually, Emmanuel, John's father, there were 5 brothers who went from Egersund to Montana. They were sheep. They were used to sheep hauling, and they went to a place where they knew each other, and they get work very easily when you know each other. There were 2 sisters back in Egersund, and it was especially screening in Egersund with the relation of John, who were back in Norway and have never met John at all. So it was a strange screening in Egersund, and they asked me how the family was and so on, and so it's connection, but it's so so far away, and some lose the connection at all. Yeah, they're well, I don't know.
Well, it's such an interesting question. And one of the things that struck me so much about the film was the discourse on immigration and cross-continental exchange that you're engaging in, right? Because it is true. I mean, and I think what a lot of us who are a part of this discussion today have a lot of curiosity about that kind of continued connection. And some of us, still remain very closely connected to, I've got relatives in Norway on both sides of my family. And that connection is now 4 generations away, right?
Okay. Yeah.
It's not my nearest relatives anymore. No. But why do we still foster that connection, or why don't we? Right. And so and when there are as many people who claim they are Norwegian American as there are Norwegians today,
yeah.
What kind of a relationship do our two countries have in this kind of conversation as well? And I think that is fascinating. So how did John's family in Egersund react to kind of seeing what their relative?
Well, I got a lot of questions, and they were curious about a lot of things with the family in Montana. But for me as well, it's a way of. I think that the film is also should be a reminder for the Norwegian people that it's not long ago that we were poor people, and we left with a hope of and a dream of a better life. And I mean, it's so easy to forget for all of us. I mean, and I hope, and I think I've got so many feedbacks and reaction back, and I think the film can be a reminder of everybody that you have to think that story, the family story of us. So, well, I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's, Vesterheim Museum, the part of the mission of the museum is preserving the immigrant story, right? And thinking about what's the significance of those connections, and how also a history that's planted between Norway and the United States, it's mostly 19th and 20th century based, because it's matter today. And that's a question that I love to play around with answers, but I think your film is trying to answer some of that too, right? And thinking about questions of legacy and inheritance.
Yeah.
And all of those.
Yeah. So, well, it was, if someone had asked me in 2015 if I should make a story from Montana, I would say no way, that was never going to happen. But so suddenly it is there, and you have to make that film, and that was happening the evening when I met John, and so it's a long process, and actually my it was okay response in Norway, both in cinema and the TV, and actually the screening in the Norwegian television, the Norwegian broadcasting television, had what you call a marking share of 47% that evening, and that means that 47% of people who watched television that evening saw the film about John, and I think that surprised the television company that the score of that film was so high. So I was pleased with that. Yeah.
Fantastic. That's fantastic. So there are lots of questions popping up, and there are a lot of questions that have to do with John himself. I think there's a lot of curiosity about John, and I think for like you're talking about the success of your film you have such a strong protagonist in the film, and so there's a few people are saying John's whipping up of a batch of lefse and the music he plays. And his respect for the heritage, right? I think about what's going to happen to all of those photographs that he's thumbing through. And someone saying, he was raised it seems like he was raised in a very traditional manner.
Yeah.
Traditional manner. And so how did John react to you saying, hey, I would like to make a film about you?
Well, as I said, he was proud that I wanted to, and I came from Norway, where his father came from, and wanted to make film about him. But he was, I think he was proud of that. But actually, he was so easy to work with. I mean, every time I was phoned either to him or the neighbors to planning for the next trip, when I arrived, he had some suggestion of what we should do the next 5 days for filming. I mean, every time I come over, he had some plans for doing it, and it was so nice working in it because he was so positive and actually so easy to work with, and. We work about 4 or 5 days, and then that was enough both for us and him actually. And every time we got so much nice thing, and some of that was his ideas every time. So that's so nice to work with. Like a rancher, like John, that was superb. Yeah.
So he has a little creativity in his soul then as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think so. And he understood how it functioned in a way. So, yeah,
it's incredible.
It was nice. Yep.
Yeah. Amazing. So, there is one question here about has John seen the film? And how did John react to the film?
Yeah. Actually, I had a screening in Bozeman, but that was a year after the premiere in Norway. Actually, it was 3 years since I've seen John at that picture in Bozeman and the premiere there, because the COVID delayed the premiere for 1 year, but the premiere in Bozeman was so special. Actually, it was about almost 500 in the audience at that screening, and the Ringling Five, the orchestra who's playing on the rodeo, they were playing before the film, and both John and Jim and Jim's family were attending. So it was magic. It was fantastic screening. Yes. Mm.
Oh my gosh. Did you expect that many people to show up?
No, not at all. I mean, Jason, who I mentioned, the cinematographer, he is running this doc series in Bozeman, and we were discussing in beforehand that, okay, let us say 100, perhaps 150 to expect, but it was crazy.
Oh my gosh. What was John's reaction to 500 people showing up?
I think he almost was proud, but it didn't. I mean, you can see how John reacted. He liked to talk to people, and if it's 100 or 400 or 500, that doesn't matter for him. I don't think so. But I think he was proud. Yeah.
It's amazing. There's one that we got a comment here that John's intelligence and his curiosity, we were an ability to learn were incredibly evident throughout the film. And so that, I mean, just his disposition and kind of just curiosity. I love the hunting scene. He's clearly positioning himself as the elder who knows exactly what to do. And just that dynamic, kind of how he's setting up his own persona within his community as well.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's really, really, yeah. I know. And I love this too, the costume. I mean, it wasn't costuming, right? But just the way that the clothing even wore out in this scene, right? And John, that magic pink red jacket that's got all the tears and holes. And then you have the three guys with the ultimate hunting gear, right? Everything matches everything. It's such a dichotomy of the simplicity of John and kind of the technical nature of the rest of the world.
Yeah, it was nice being there and filming and the nature and so on. It's so actually the range is I don't know, it's 1,700 meters above sea level, so it's very high up in the mountain, and the winter is really, really cold. Yeah.
I am sure. So it's a 1,700 meters above sea level. Is it, how big? I mean, how big acreage wise is the ranch, or how big? How many? What's the size of land?
We call it 5,000 mole, but I think it's 1,400 acres. Could be. Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge. That is huge. One of the things that gets kind of brought up, he brings it up, I guess, in one of the conversations is also about the question about land rights and what is going to happen. And they have one of those conversations about all those $1 million homes that are being built and all the ranches being bought up by all the big city slickers coming to Montana. And of course, it's a huge topic of conversation. And so do you know if anyone has suggested to John to leave his land to a conservation organization, or does John have a plan for what will happen to his land? Do you know?
Actually, while we were filming, he tried, and his neighbor were helping him, trying to make an what you call organization for people at the farm, and tried to do that, but he didn't manage to do it.
Okay.
I don't know what because that was a way of perhaps we should following that in process, but we're giving up because it ended in nothing happened. So actually it is his nephew who will
care.
Yeah.
Wow. That's an incredible. I mean, the question about inheritance especially in Montana, there's so much discourse happening in the United States right now about land, right? And in some ways, when we talk about the immigration narrative, so much of the hope, right, for Norwegians coming to the United States was this ownership of land, right? I am the descendant of one who was number 12 out of 14. And there was no future in Norway, right? There was no hope that 1 through 11 would allow for them to ever own land. And so his passion for the land is something that's really, really so clear, that comes out so clearly.
Yeah. And it's true. What should he do with the $1 million of the dollars? I mean, repeat that many times, and I believe he wouldn't sell. I mean, and even if he would sell, he was not sure that people who buy it would run the ranch, just have it as this this rich people coming up and have it then in the summer ranch. Yeah, so well, he didn't like that.
No, no, that's so, yeah, no, it's pretty, that's so apparent. So how is John doing now?
Well, a year ago he moved from the ranch, and he's staying in Bozeman, and for a place for older people, and I think he have a good life there, and as the neighbor said, okay, now he got some new audience telling all his stories for us. So I think he is good, the neighbor said. And I think because he loved to tell his stories to everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fabulous. That's amazing. Yeah. Wow. So John is now, he would be how old? 95, 96?
It was 96 in May, so it will be 97 in next May. So, well, he said in the film he will be 100, so I believe him.
Yeah, I wouldn't bet against him. There's no way I would bet against his time. Wow. So that's incredible. So Frode, how much time, so the film, there are a couple of people in the audience drawing on kind of the sense of time in the film and the speed. We've talked a little bit about at the beginning about the speed and kind of slow films, and I'd love to hear a little bit about how you got interested in this idea of kind of slow film. You mentioned that with your first film as well, and one comment is saying that just the pacing and kind of the gentleness of the pacing really had an ability to uplift John as a human and the multifaceted components of his life and identity. So what draws you to kind of the slower technique, not the Hollywood flashy big screen as we're so famous for in the United States film industry?
Well, of course, it's depending what kind of story you are making, and I mean both about John and the siblings and so on. You can't make a film that are fast and running fast away. So you have to slow it in the way of how they are living. I mean, they look at the nature, they're reading the nature, they're living close to the nature, and you can't do the other rhythm of that life in a film like this, in my opinion. And I think it in a way fit the film, to do it in a easy and quiet way. Yeah
Absolutely. There's one another comment is saying that we're your cinematography was beautiful, and there's an appeal of the way you constructed winter in this film. And this happened last night too at the screening in the comments, that there was kind of this awe when some of those vast vistas of the mountains and some of the valleys as well. For those of us who are living in the Midwestern part of the United States, we have great affection and fear of those winters, or at least for me, I got fear of those winter scenes because I know that's coming. And sometimes those can get dark and bleak days. And so it was, there's a lot of conversation in the chat about how beautiful those scenes are that you constructed. And I think it's interesting you start the film in the winter. And so is there a reason you decided to start this timeline of this story in the winter?
Actually, I don't remember, but I think the reason was that we are going into John's life in the hard winter, because his life is hard to the winter especially, and then come the spring and it open up and everything is growing and yeah, the cycles of the seasons are so important for a rancher like John. But I think freezing and then starting and then opening up, that will, then you come into John's life in a way that you feel that you are coming close to him, perhaps. Yeah.
It's also maybe a little bit of a sign of hope, right? You start in the most challenging time of the year, right? And then head into the seasons of hope.
Actually, I got some questions. Did you sleep in the house with John and staying overnight? And the answer was no. I didn't. But I tasted this lefse he made, and that was very nice. Wow! That he could make that lefse. That was so good.
That's fascinating. I was very curious about that. Yeah. And like, Frode, how much physical time did you spend in Montana over the course of getting all of the material that you needed for this film?
Well, I think I was 7 times in Montana, and we tried to keep all the season and kept the all the nature and so on. And yeah, so it was 7 times, and we were shooting about 4 or 5 days each time. Yeah.
It's that is a lot of back and forth.
Yeah. Yeah, it has to be. And that's yeah, you have to plan, and you have, it's hard to traveling that far. But I mean, when he had always planned for the week, it was so nice to come here with him, and it was nice working with him every time. Yeah.
No, that's it's absolutely beautiful. Did John ever want to hop on the plane with you and head back to Norway? Did John express?
I think he had actually. The premiere in Norway was at the end of COVID, and I thought it was the ending. So actually, I was thinking to invite John and Jason for the premiere in Norway, but then it was popping up again, and it was closed. Nobody could traveling from US to Norway. Yeah. In a period, and then we had planned the premiere and so on. So that was not that good feeling, but well, I think he had come the day after I asked him. He was ready, I think. Yeah.
So do you know? So why would he? Do you know what his drive was to go to Norway, just to see where his dad came from, to see that aspect of it, to meet family? Was he interested in, I don't know, exploring other components of his identity, or what kind of was the motive? Do you have a sense for what the motivation was for him?
Yeah, I think he loved to see Norway and visit his relatives. So that have been very nice to get on. But the COVID, it was closed, and we have to give up that idea. Yeah.
Yeah, so many things because of COVID.
Yeah.
So many things.
Yeah.
Well, Frode, I know we're nearing the top of the hour here, and there's so many. I'm just looking at my pages of notes here that I have, and questions keep popping up. So this is such a rich. Thank you for sharing your time and your expertise. But there's one question, maybe in these kind of as we head towards our this next chunk of the program. how was the film received in Norway? There's a question about that. And one person remarks that her cousin who lives in Oslo had already viewed it and loved it. And so there was actually a lot of, there was discourse happening before we now have the chance to talk with you. So when we talked a little bit about the broadcasting of it on the Norwegian National Broadcasting Company, but when you had this premiere in Norway, how was it received?
Well, it was very good received, and the film was nominated for the Amanda. That's a Norwegian Oscar for the best documentary. So I was very, very pleased that a jury found my film among the three best of the film and in Norway that year. So and as you see here, I got also an award from Duluth in Minnesota. So and I got one award in Italy as well. So I'm pleased, and that's but the main thing is to sitting in the audience with 500 audience and see the reaction of the audience and feel how they are looking at the story. That's the best thing.
That's incredible. So Duluth, Minnesota had a film fest and you got an award. I think on the picture I saw Best in Fest was the name of the award or something. That's so fabulous. That's a great picture of you in the harbor in Bergen there too as well. Oh, cool. So have there been reactions that have surprised you, or when you've listened? I can imagine it's so interesting as a filmmaker to sit in a room with people who are viewing it for the first time. I'd imagine maybe there's a little bit of anxiety associated with that. That's fabulous. I would be a nervous wreck. So when you sit and you listen to how people react to the stories or to the dialogue or to the images, are there any of those reactions that, as you've premiered this film places, that have surprised you, or that you didn't expect?
No, I mean there are different audience in Norway and US and Italy, and I mean the audience in US are more responded in while it is in the film. And actually I got at that screening in Bozeman, I think I get some applause after the the commercial, the Chevy commercial, and he go back to his old 37 Chevy car and repair it. That was that never happened in Norway, but it did in Bozeman, Montana. Yes.
That is awesome. Okay, that's a great moment, right? That Chevy commercial. There were a lot of laughs about that last night as well, as people were kind of, it brought back just an absolute genre. So, I mean, John in some ways has been a star from the beginning, right? Like he's had some starring roles.
Yeah, sometimes something's happening in his life, and I mean Patricia Arquette in the picture and so on. That's his neighbor was a famous photographer up there, and he bring Patricia with me, and he took a fantastic picture of him. And the producer of the Chevy, he told me the same. Well, we were looking for a location for the Chevy, and we stopped with a rancher. He was working at the road, and who was that? That was John, and he ended up at the main character in the Chevy. So that's life.
That's life. That's a fascinating. I mean, it's a fascinating story of the absolute unexpected, right?
Exactly.
Of like these moments that just walk into your life and all of a sudden change its trajectory, change the course, or supply you with fabulous stories to share as you go forward. So very cool. That is amazing. Were there any reactions in Norway that surprised you among the Norwegian audiences?
No, actually not. But I have had some screening at the cinema with a historian that telling from the story of the immigration from the region where the film was screening, and that was very popular to listening and introduction to the film, and I told about a little bit how I found John, and that was an event that was very successful combination for the film, and it got a lot of audience in Norway as well. Yes.
Well, that's fascinating. Well, we're coming up on 2025. Weirdly, the calendar keeps changing. We're getting to the 200th commemoration of 200 years of immigration between Norway and North America. And so I think this conversation that we're having about the immigration story, right before our webinar started, you were sharing that you had been at your alma mater up at Volda and sharing this story with college students, with university students who, and I think that's a really interesting point of conversation to frame this film in the historical conversation about immigration, but also the role of immigration today. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but have you gotten response? How do younger Norwegians maybe react to a film about a 90-year-old cowboy?
Well, I have to admit that the audience age in Norway are 50 plus or whatever, but I've spoken to young people who've seen it, and I think I reached that younger age as well, because some of them are interested in the history of Norway and the immigration and the relationship, and there are so many family and people in Norway that also are interested in how their family managed to their life in the US as well. So yeah, it's interesting, and actually I hope to perhaps make a series in this 2025 for the anniversary of the first trip, but it's hard to finance, and I'm not sure I managed it, but I will try.
Well, we are all eager to see what you would create. I think we would love to see that. Yeah, I think it will be. It's an interesting time of marking the strong relationship that continues today between Norway and the United States, and that brings up one question that several people have asked too, of having now loved John and fallen in love with John. For these audiences, what will be your next story that you hope to tell in your next film? Or can you tell us? I guess maybe we can't. Maybe you're not able to share.
Well, I can, but I can tell that that's a very, very local story from the island that I live, and it's more like an archive film, because after the Second World War, there came a family from the inland to this island, and he became a policeman on the island, but he had one hobby. He did filming with a 16mm camera from after World War and to he died in 1968. And that material is so nice. He filmed people, how the community is built up in 25 years period, and that's my next film.
What an incredible local archive!
Yeah, but I don't need to traveling to Montana for that shooting. So it's short way.
Yeah, a little less commute, a little less time required.
It's different. Yeah.
Have there been any cries for a second John? Second film about John?
No.
No. Okay. Okay.
But there are so many stories to be told, and so some of them you can catch and do a film of. And I hope I will make some more.
So if you are talking to audiences either in Norway or in America about this film, and thinking about kind of what your films tell very personal, you're very up close and personal. They're both with speed, but also the kind of the aesthetic of your work is very personal. And so if somebody asks you, okay, well, what would you like me to take away? What would you like me to learn from watching this film? Or what do you want me to take away as I move beyond a 90-minute experience of watching a film? Do you have a takeaway that you really hope this film instills?
Well, it's a little bit hard for me to tell how people react or so with my film, but I think the film about John is about friendship, the value of the life, and also be able to work as long as you can about old age and they have lived a long life and have experienced that not all people have. And I like to tell a story about those who can give in a way for the next generation, perhaps, how it was and what can we learn, take on for the next generation, perhaps. I don't know. I'm not a filmmaker that are making a film that, okay, how you can learn that and that you should live like that. But I hope I can give some reflection in my film that keeps on further for people who will watch it.
It's beautiful. I think, there are so many beautiful scenes with John at his parents' headstones at the cemetery. I think it's fascinating that I found that so fascinating that they are not buried in a public, or more of at a church or anything. It is very familial, right? It is very on their own space.
Yeah. And he puts his own stone in between.
It's just that image, those last conversations where they're having out there just are so poignant and powerful about just the questions about legacy and preserving stories and carrying on stories into the future. That I think for this audience and for Westerheim, the organization of Westerheim in and of itself, the Western home, it's this question about cultural legacy and preservation. And so, Frode, we cannot say thank you enough. Hjertelig takk for oss at you have been willing to share your time and expertise with us and help us understand John in some new ways. And learn more about him. We are cheering for him to make it to 100 for sure. For sure. So thank you so very much. And to everybody who popped questions and populated questions in here for Frode as well. Thank you so much for your thoughtful questions and reflections. There are so many more that we can include. There's comments about the quality of light and the power of emotion in this film. And so, Frode, I think it's safe to say you have big fans here in the United States as well.
100%. I feel confident in saying you have a new fan club at Westerheim that is forming right now. So thank you for letting us screen the film and share it. And thank you for being so generous to join us by Zoom. We are really grateful to you.
Thank you to all of you. I mean, perhaps next time I'm joining you at the Westerheim then.
I would love that. Let's make that be a thing. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.